Again, as we begin our practice and kind of study, reflection, and our practice for today, as well as with anything, again and again, just reconnecting with our three essential motivations, with our joy, our appreciation, really expand our bodhicitta, and connect with our devotion and awe and reverence for just how perfect this moment is. So again, welcome. We'll spend maybe 15, 20 minutes just kind of reflecting again on some of the really essential practices and things that our great, precious teachers have given us as tips and tools to explore the Dharma and develop that, and integrate that again in the context of our Ngondro. These really essential points that we're just encouraged again and again and again to keep in our mind. And again, the whole of Dharma, like we often say, can be summed up into these essential points of Dharma practice, the Dharma path. And what is Dharma? But the totally related with discovering the beautiful qualities and nature and qualities and abilities and power of what? Of our own essential nature, of our own mind, of our own true, everlasting, ever-present bodhicitta and wisdom and power, through the great support of those who have fully developed it and are well on the way, with our teachers, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas. Refraining from harm, engaging in benefit, taming our own mind. Right? That's, again, we say so often, is the distillation of that. That's the Dharma. That's the essence of the Buddhist teachings as far as the path. So working with our own mind is the essence of Dharma practice. Really connecting with our joy, our devotion, our bodhicitta, our trust, which means we've done some exploration, and we've done both intellectually as well as experientially in the teachings. And so what I thought to kind of just really, I know we mention it often, and I don't know how much just in these sessions we've really spent time to look at some of these fundamental aspects of just even like these 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma, which are nothing other again than just looking at on a really common level what we all share, what we all have, what we're all endowed with. So I am going to focus a little bit more today within the time we have to just kind of review the freedoms and endowments, of which there are 8 freedoms, 8 freedom states, 8 states we're totally free of, and that allow us to be able to practice Dharma, to be able to explore our own nature and bring out its beautiful qualities for ourselves and others. And then, so 10 states we're free of that would prevent us from practicing Dharma, from exploring our true nature. And then 10 circumstances, 10 advantages, 10 endowments, 10 conditions that we have that are actually totally in alignment with discovering our our true nature. So I know we've gone over them, but again, even myself, can I remember what they are? The teachings again, like the Buddha describes so often, or Shantideva, we're born with this precious human body, that's like a great vessel to bring ourselves and others across the ocean of samsara. So it's so important, we don't waste it in vain. We're like the Buddha uses the analogy of like a blind, totally destitute beggar coming upon a precious jewel and never using it, or having a treasure and never using it. Having the means to escape from prison and never applying it. Having an open door and staying in the cage, So really being mindful, again, we're just encouraged so often to really be aware of what are these freedoms, what are these endowments, and then how do we protect them? And not everything lasts forever. So maybe we'll just kind of go over the basic thing. The 8 freedom states that allow us, that 8 states we're free of, in which we couldn't practice Dharma. Do you recall what they are? So one thing is to think, we can think in order. Essentially we're not born in the hell realms. We're not born in the Preda realm, which means the hungry ghost realm. We're not born as animals in any of the animal realms. And we're not born as a formless God in one of the higher aspects of the God realms. And then even within being born human, we're not born human in some kind of barbaric culture, where there is no Dharma. That's what we mean by barbarian. And here I don't even necessarily mean official Dharma, but just where like violence and, taking advantage, where negative emotions are glorified, I guess could be maybe a simple way of looking at barbarians, being born in a place. So we're free of that, for the most part. We're also free of kind of mistaken views to some degree. Meaning, again, these kind of extreme views of like totally glorifying violence, of glorifying, making our self-importance, or, things like that. We're also not born in a universe where it's called a dark kalpa. We're not born in a place where no Buddha has appeared. So where are we now? I think that's 7. And then we're not born with such impaired senses that we have no contact with the outside world, with the other humans in our world, in the Dharma. So we're free of those things. So we could look at the deepest, from the one way of kind of remembering those basically is, right, there's 6 realms of beings that the Buddha said, 6 major realms that all entail samsara. There's the hells, there's the Preda realm, there's the animal realm, there's the human realm, and then there's the god realms, which are like the asuras and then the gods. But we're not born in the formless. So we could think kind of the furthest outreaches. The hells we're free of. The Predas we're free of being born there. We're free of being born in the animal realm. And we're free of being born in one of these higher states of the God realms, which says the formless gods, right? So, and essentially what that means, that's a state where we're born gods with just in single with no, just kind of asleep for aeons. And so that's kind of narrowing it down. We are born human, and we're free as humans. We're free from being born in a barbaric land, in a barbaric culture. We're free of being, having kind of wrong views or mistaken views, kind of distorted views, things that cause more, views that glorify things that bring more trouble actually for ourselves and others. We're free of that. Again, in different degrees. And we're free of being born where there's no Buddha. And we're free, and we have all of our, immediately, we're able to make contact through our senses with the outside world, with the world in which we exist, right? So that's in a nutshell, the 8 freedom states that allow us to practice Dharma. But now we could be born with those things and not necessarily have these extra circumstances, these 10 circumstantial states or 10 advantages, 10 endowments. For what? For actually practicing the Dharma, for engaging with exploring and the nature of our own mind, the nature of our own heart, bringing out its qualities, purifying what's obscuring it, and being of benefit for others and ourselves. Again, realizing true nature, and through compassion, helping others to realize their own true nature as well. So within these, again, there's, if we want to kind of have frames for remembering them, there's 10 endowments or 10 advantages. And there are 5 that kind of are, we're checking in with the outside circumstances in which we're born. And then there's 5 that are more connected to our own individual circumstances and proclivities. So, to go over them again, kind of briefly, the 5, we're born actually where a Buddha has appeared. There's so many aeons and so many world systems in which no Buddha ever appears. We're born in an aeon in which a Buddha has appeared. In fact, not just one Buddha will appear, but according to the omniscient words of truth of Buddha Shakyamuni, there's not just one, but 1,000 Buddhas appear in this aeon, called the fortunate aeon, right? So a Buddha has appeared. And not only did the Buddha appear, the Buddha taught. And not only did he teach all those 2,600, 2,800 years ago, but those teachings still remain. And they can be understood. And there are those that currently who have, through their great kindness and diligence, have some knowledge and realization of the teachings, and with great kindness and bodhicitta, share them with us. So those are kind of the circumstances outer circumstances that we are endowed with that allow us to practice Dharma. And then we have the 5 that are related to our own individual circumstances. So within those 5 outer circumstances, again, we are born human. And we're born human in a place where the Dharma flourishes, where the Dharma is present and alive. There's living lineage masters. And we have all our faculties. We have the ability to interface with the outside world. And we have, including our mind and our intellect, not to mention our senses that, allow that interface. We have those intact. And we're also, if you think about it, we're also born where maybe in ancient times, if you were born blind or deaf, you wouldn't be able to. Even now, if you were born with maybe some senses that are impaired, there's still ways of connecting. How beautiful, how great. So, again, I won't dawdle here. All of our faculties are intact. And then we don't have conflicting lifestyles. That's the fourth individual circumstance. And we have faith in the teachings. So those are the five inner circumstances we have. And again, the teachers, again and again, they say we should really remember what these things are and contemplate them. Like, you can look in, like, Words of My Perfect Teacher. Such a great book to have and to study. It goes into great detail on these kind of subjects. And then there's also this guide to the words of my perfect teacher, by Khenpo Nawang Palzang, great emanation of Vimalamitra. Goes again into great detail. And then, of course, these are so fundamental. They're in so many teachings from Jigme Lingpa, from our venerable teachers, Khenchen Palden, Khenpo Tsewang, Dudjom Rinpoche, and the torch lighting the way to freedom goes over these freedoms and advantages. And then even to some degree, like Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and many teachings. I mean, Shantideva goes on and on. So there's other places to explore that are easy to, like, look at these things more. So we're born with these things, but again, they're not always going to last. And something that Khenpo Tsewang Rinpoche, whenever he goes over these things, he kind of mentions, we should, if we remember what these things are, and then we check in for ourselves, kind of where we're at. I mean, we could be familiar with what are all of, like, the things we're free of. What are those circumstances like? And that's what I was referring to when we can look in these books and in the sutras and things and really look at, well, what is it? What is some of a glimpse of what it's like to be born in the hell realms, for example? Anyway, but then particularly with these circumstantial endowments, really looking at those, reflecting on the truth of those. And then particularly with our individual endowments, like Khenpo Tsewang mentions often, he doesn't kind of go into detail so much right then, but what are the last two? Without a conflicting lifestyle and having faith in the teachings. Those things can waver. They can wax and wane with all of us. So, like, looking to see is good. And now there's some other things that also come up in the teachings that are equally important to kind of be aware of. Like, I think I forget which teachings, but one of our great masters, teachers, kind of likens, like, these 18 freedoms and endowments are like a flock of sheep that we have in our care. And then there's these other things which are called, they're kind of 16 wolves that can be sneaking in and picking off the flock. So these are called the 8 intrusive circumstances. And then I think 8 proclivities, 8 incompatible, proclivities, or kind of like habitual patterns we can get sucked into easily that lead to kind of no time for practicing now, and therefore maybe due to karma, we're starting to move in a different direction with the great fortune we've had. And so again, there's a lot of detail to these things, but I think maybe I'll go for the sake of kind of having some detail to thing. I'll go over them now. And again, everyone should know, definitely in, like, Words of My Perfect Teacher, these other books I mentioned, you can really look at the details of what these great masters kind of have elucidated in more detail, more time than we have this afternoon to go into. So these 8 intrusive circumstances that leave no freedom to practice Dharma. So one is essentially, and these are related to, like these last two, our faith and our confidence in the Dharma. And our ability, and how much we're leading a right conduct, a right lifestyle that is like conducive to Dharma practice, meaning it's creating good karma for the future, generating merit. So, and I'm going to read these things, but similarly, we shouldn't use these as big downers. So much of the path is purifying. So we shouldn't shy away from when we hit these raw spots of recognizing our own distorted views that we're holding, our own distorted kind of negative propensities that actually cause more trouble, more turmoil, more kind of are actually holding us back and undermining our practice. We're all here due to so many good circumstances. So when we realize these things, again, these are opportunities to purify, to apply the antidotes, to ask our, pray to our teachers for their support, and make our aspirations to be aware of what we can purify and let go of in order to bring our bigger bodhicitta and truly be a benefit for others and ourselves, okay? So essentially, these 5 intrusive things that can come into our lives that kind of cause more static and we can get caught up in, and we're not practicing as much as we could. And therefore maybe that's creating karma for maybe the Dharma just fading away from our experience. So when the 5 poisons, when our negative emotions, our anger, our jealousy, our attachments, our arrogance, our doubt, our hesitation, when we're so overwhelmed by those coming up in ourselves that we're just kind of distracted and discouraged and pull back from Dharma practice. We forget it. We forget the instructions. We forget our bodhicitta. So many things. So, these are just things to be aware of, right? We want to keep our mindfulness, our alertness, our conscientiousness to what we hold dear, and keep open and aware to seeing, what are these things, So, and then if simply we're just so stupid, this is the second one, being so stupid that, we're actually not, for whatever reason, we're not able to really hear the teachings, understand the meaning or the words, and essentially we're easily led astray if we can't really get some bearings. And that's simply, due to, again, all of this is due to our past actions. So what can we do then? We can pray, to our teacher, pray to Guru Rinpoche, pray to our root teacher, and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, that we purify our obscurations, that our wisdom can increase, do some Manjushri practice or something. And then taking on a false guide, taking on bad spiritual friends that kind of lead us in the wrong directions. Those are also circumstances we can engage with that we're not heading in a good direction. I'm sorry, again, this is a lot, so maybe I'm going to go over some. Maybe in the future we can look more into these, or as I'm going, if you have questions, then ask questions and we can have some kind of dialogue with this process of our Saturday meetings. Then other things are, again, this is more related to ourselves, just being lazy. We've heard the teachings, but we're lazy. Either we don't have enough, confidence in ourselves that we could actually improve, or we're just too caught up in other things, they have more priority, and we just don't practice. Lazy. And then the 6, being when we're discouraged by bad karma ripening. And, which again, that's an opportunity for purification. But instead of taking it as that, when challenging circumstances come up and we just are so caught up in the challenge of it and the suffering of it, that we become discouraged and we pull back from our practice. And then the 7th, when we're in a situation where we don't have any autonomy due to whatever the circumstances are, where we have some commitment or we're overpowered by some other person or persons in which we don't really have a choice as to what we're doing. And so that means we can't practice to some degree, or a big degree, or fully. And then there's sometimes, just again, as far as Dharma practice, where these are more connected to attachment to this life, where we might be connecting to the Dharma just really more out of fear of challenging situations, fear of sickness, fear of poverty, fear of, things that are worth being concerned about, but kind of more involved with this life, and without a bigger view of karma, without really bodhichitta. That's missing kind of the bigger vision of beyond this life and beyond samsara. So kind of when we're just kind of acting within those kind of more out of where our fear ratio is much bigger than the ratio of our view, of a bigger view beyond this life, beyond samsara, then it's kind of, again, don't have a real view of just how vast and how true and how immediate the Dharma is, how the teachings are. And then kind of another aspect of that, the 8th, intrusive circumstance, is kind of more related to kind of using the Dharma more to how do we say, where we're kind of imposters, where we're connecting with the Dharma more, not so much out of fear, but out of wanting more prestige, or wanting more wealth, or wanting more food, to gain possessions, or have people take care of you, or, things like that. Again, it's more connected to this life. And it's not so much, again, this is the attitude. We can only look to our own minds and see, right, how much we're looking for, essentially, right, these are the 8 worldly concerns. When our connection to Dharma is more caught up in the 8 worldly concerns, hope and fear, and more within this life, All right. So then these other propensities that kind of leave not a lot of time and freedom to actually practice the Dharma, again, when we're so tightly bound to our other commitments in this life, in this world, that we don't make time to practice Dharma. Again, that always varies person to person, how much time we have, but when our commitments are out so much that it's causing less time to practice, formally or informally. And then if we're kind of so ensnared by our negative habitual patterns that we don't try to improve our behavior. We might know better, but we don't. Maybe these are all, also, and then when we're not really, we can hear about all these teachings about what other beings go through in the hell realms or the preta realms, the animal realms, the God realms, all the defects of samsara essentially, as well as the challenges we face in this life, but we just kind of stay numb to it and don't have any kind of, for whatever reasons, we don't have our determination or wish to actually free ourselves, not to mention others. And then another big, really big, these are kind of getting more severe as we go in a way. No real trust in the teachings or in our teacher, where we have very little devotion and trust in the Dharma or in the teachers. Again, that's a whole process, right, of actually exploring the qualities of a good teacher, but really looking at, where for each one of us is that place where that trust is lacking. And again, I'm not talking about that we have to have blind faith, but like true trust due to experience and knowledge and feeling, seeing truth enough to move beyond kind of what we know, into discovering, right, our primordial nature, our bodhicitta. So no devotion or faith in the Dharma or the teachers is, again, really negative kind of propensity. Again, these are all based on habitual patterns, so everything's mutable, everything's fluid, right? Then when we take pleasure in harmful thoughts and harmful actions of ourselves and others. And the sixth, which is again something really interesting, compilate the really negative propensity for practicing Dharma, is just simply really not being interested. 7. These are in regard to like the promises we've made to ourselves and to the lamas of the lineage before all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. When we've entered the basic Buddhism, the vows we've taken, and into Mahayana, the Bodhicitta vows and commitments we've taken. When we actually break our Bodhicitta vows and commitments and kind of hold back and get caught up in things that move against them. Yeah, it's really when we're undermining our practice. We're dragging a lot of junk around. And then, not only with that, but then having entered the Vajrayana, and with the Samayas and commitments we've made to ourselves and to our teacher, and in witness of all the objects of refuge, when we have broken these and don't acknowledge it and don't purify it, that's really bad news for ourselves and for our friends and Sangha family and all beings. So again, this is just things to like keep watch over. Don't shy away from seeing these negative things. That's why we do our Vajrasattva practice. That's why we make our aspiration prayers. That's why we train ourselves in bodhicitta. So much of our practice is actually having this joy, devotion, confidence, and really activating our bodhicitta to purify what's holding us back. Because that's, again, the only difference is how thick our obscurations are. Our Buddha nature in the teachings is always there. Our bodhicitta is vast love, vast wisdom, vast compassion. It's just covered up due to causes and conditions. And so are all these good, wonderful freedoms and advantages we have. That's also due to such beautiful circumstances. So again, we're just, by looking at these things, we're not ignoring. We're acknowledging what's good and beautiful, and that can bring out, soften our minds and hearts, and then seeing what ways in which we're mixed up, or have made mistakes. And seeing a mistake as a mistake is the first step to purification. Because we're already pure, right, in the teachings. But we have to make these moves to actually purify, really apply, bring stability to this great, beautiful view we're being introduced to. Bring out our bodhicitta. Activate our bodhicitta means turning our ego clinging upside down, you know? So again, then all this is coming back to our own mind. And we're so fortunate that we have this precious human birth to explore our own mind, to tame our own mind. Using this boat of precious human body to carry ourselves and others across the ocean of samsara, you know. So that means tending to the boat, acknowledging the boat, glorifying the boat, you know, repairing the boat, keeping it good. Really use this vessel to really benefit ourselves and others. So again, the teachers say again and again, this is just the first thought that turns the mind, right? What are the 8 freedoms? What are the 10 advantages? What are these 16 kind of intrusive and kind of attitudes that we can get snaggled up in and can really lead us away from the advantages? And so apply the antidotes with them. Refrain from harm, engage in benefit, tame our own mind. You know, these 3 great assistants, whether in our formal practice or our informal practice. Really keeping our mindfulness, our alertness, our conscientiousness. Just checking in gently but fully with how much we're really connecting. And again, that's why Rinpoche always, again and again, our joy, our devotion, our closeness feeling for the Dharma is so important. And then within that view, within that warmth, within that nurturing, we can look at these other things that we can be getting mixed up in, you know, either due to our own ability, outer circumstances that can cause more trouble, where we can get easily led more astray and start going down the wrong path and creating more negative karma, as well as our inner attitudes, which are even more important to be aware of and deal with, because it's, again, our inner attitude that makes all the difference. And as we generate merit and wisdom, then we become stronger, and that's the path of awakening. So, again, the teachings say, our teachers say, and it's true, we have this beautiful connection, and it's not accidental or coincidental or co-accidental, as Rinpoche says. It's the result of really good past actions and circumstances, whether it's just hearing the name of a Buddha, coming in contact with the Bodhisattva, to whatever degree we've developed our merit and wisdom. And we're moving on the path. We're on this path of awakening and unfolding and purification. So we don't know what comes next, but we do know it's totally dependent on our attitude now and the actions we take. So that's why looking at these freedoms and endowments, really all the qualities of this precious human birth. And I just went over today kind of these 8 freedoms, 10 endowments, these 16 kind of wolves to watch out for, the kind of things that can really undermine our practice. But again, there's other aspects too of the precious human birth, like comparisons of how rare it is, how really rare it is. for example. So we won't go over that now. I'm going to stop talking, and I hope this is somewhat helpful. Again, it's kind of each part of these teachings is so vast, but I think just trying to use these sessions we have to just kind of reflect on some of these basics. And, like I mentioned, there's so many great teachings. For even, like I thought to really bring up, there's so many of these YouTube things that have been recorded on YouTube, as well as so many wonderful books published from our teachers, Khenpo Tsewang Dongyal Rinpoche and Venerable Khenpo Tsewang Dongyal Rinpoche, as well as so many YouTube teachings. And back at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, Khenpo Tsewang Rinpoche so kindly went over these teachings from Dudjom Rinpoche, and he really went into quite a lot of detail on some of these real essential teachings. So that's another wonderful resource for kind of listening to and contemplating and really stirring into our hearts and minds and settling into our practice. So thank you. Yes?
Where was the list of the wolves from the propensities and the incursions? Where was that list from?
In like Words of My Perfect Teacher?
From there?
Of calling it wolves and sheep?
Yeah, the list, of the intrusions and the propensities.
Yeah, that's in all of these. In Words of My Perfect Teacher, it's definitely in the section where it's going over, again, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. So in the section on the precious human birth, in Words of My Perfect Teacher, it's there. In this guide to the Words of My Perfect Teacher, again in that same section on the precious human birth. In Torch Lighting the Way to Freedom, on the section where Dudjom Rinpoche is going over precious human birth and the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. He goes over all these 16 as well as the 8 freedoms endowments. And then too, I just have this nice book in this commentary about Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, which is a commentary on the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. He goes over, I think in the chapter about using how the Bodhisattva practice of study, contemplation, meditation. He goes over, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche goes over the 8 freedoms, 10 endowments, and these 16 intrusive circumstances and propensities. And there's so many other books. Jigme Lingpa's, what is the Jigme Lingpa that goes over the foundation, the path? Treasury of, I'm sorry, I'm losing my, there's a lot out there about all these things, but these are some great, just to start there's nothing missing. There's just more great kind of elucidations from these other great, really knowledgeable and highly realized lineage masters that are available to us. So thank you. So we'll do our practice now. We have about 45 minutes, so we'll have a session for our Ngondro practice that kind of is held within maybe 45 to 50 minutes. So just know that, I thought, as we do these sessions, we're kind of working with the time we have, which we're all doing in our daily practice too. So if you have more time in your day, just because we do a 45-minute Ngondro practice or half-hour Ngondro practice on these Saturdays, if you have more time, then of course do that. There's flexibility. But what we want to do for our own individual practice is have our goals be attainable. So the expectations and the promises we make to ourselves and to our teachers should really be within what our current capacities are. So if you have less time, do the full practice with less time. If you have more time, do the full practice with more time. But as a continuum, try to do what you know you can always do, no matter what. Whether you feel great, whether you feel really bad, whether great things are happening, whether awful things are happening, whether you're sick, whether you've got a totally busy schedule, what can you know you can always commit to doing? And then if you can do more, great, do that. And in each case, dedicate the merit. Keep the essence of bodhicitta, joy, devotion, trust, closeness feeling, reverence, bodhicitta, bodhicitta, bodhicitta. Okay.